With me now from the Daily Wire and host of the Ian Haworth Show. Welcome back, Ian.
Thank you for having me.
So protesters are putting the pressure on Governor Cuomo to answer for his nursing home policies. Do you think it's about time that he face some accountability for his actions?
I mean, it's about time with about 6 or 7 months extra. I mean, his behavior during the COVID-19 outbreak has been pretty deplorable from the start. Really, the worst part of it, though, is the fact that he is now trying to erase history and rewrite himself, as you said, as the hero of COVID, coming out with a book. Like, he should really be too busy to write like a book on his own success, and let alone the fact that it's all lies. So the biggest problem in my mind is the fact that his policy was a mandate for nursing homes to accept COVID positive patients. That is the real core of this issue. And just earlier in October, he claimed that that never happened. Like, he is full on lying. The problem is, though, most of the media, including CNN and his brother, are just covering for him, applauding him as the hero of COVID. He's even being mentioned as a potential future presidential pick. It really is just madness when you look at the data that COVID has really hit New York one of the worst ways, if not the worst ways we've seen. And yet the focus is always on Republicans, Republican governors, and Republican presidents. It's really appalling.
It is appalling, because especially when you look at the numbers, New York and Florida have similar sized populations. Both have big metropolitan, busy areas. Florida even is the second oldest state in the union behind Maine. So they have an older population than New York even does. And yet New York has more than double the amount of COVID deaths than Florida does. And of course, what did Florida do from the beginning? Even when they allowed bars and restaurants to remain open, when they only briefly shut down, then they reopened much faster than all the states, is they started to clean up and to secure their nursing homes. They were testing like crazy in nursing homes to quarantine and separate out people who had been exposed from people who were infected and ill. Whereas, as we were discussing, Cuomo, he threw them all up, into a giant heap in the nursing homes. And even his administration sent body bags with these COVID infected patients when they returned to the nursing homes, sometimes as many as 2 or 3 body bags with them. And to me, in my mind, that is an indication that Cuomo knew exactly what he was doing. And now you see him almost looking for a scapegoat for his lack of leadership, his failures in leadership. And I've been speaking to a lot of members of the Jewish community, a lot of Jewish leaders in New York City, and they say that his new round of lockdowns that came just last week are disproportionately affecting the city's Jewish communities. They say that they've been doing everything to the T. They've been following all the guidelines. Some of these zip codes have only like 13 cases of COVID, haven't had deaths in 5 weeks, and yet they're being shut down and put in the red. So what do you make of that situation?
I think it's the kind of behavior we've come to expect from Democrats, which is to really focus on votes when it comes to criticizing specific communities. I don't actually think some of the criticisms leveled against really specifically the ultra-Orthodox community in places like Brooklyn for some of their behavior, some of the community's behavior, not the entire community, but like, for example, some of these mass funerals we've seen or mass celebrations. I think during the pandemic, if we're being sensible, those aren't a great idea. The issue comes, though, is when you have people like Andrew Cuomo, people like Bill De Blasio, openly criticizing specifically the Jewish community, while when it comes to, say, the Black community or the Hispanic community, when there are spikes in those groups, it's to do with systemic racism. It's not to do with specific behavior. When there's Black Lives Matter protests where people, no masks, screaming in each other's faces, 2 or 3 inches away, that's almost applauded by the Democrats in New York, with Bill de Blasio's own daughter being part of this group. And yet when it's Jews carrying on, really ultra-Orthodox Jews who don't tend to vote Democrat, that's a group they can focus on and criticize and be seen to be doing something about the outbreak. So it's really, I'm not sure I'd go as far as to say it's anti-Semitic, but the double standard element of it certainly winks towards that notion.
Definitely. And what I'm hearing, and of course, I don't want to be like the left, how they just call everyone racist, so I'm not going to sit here and call everyone anti-Semitic. However, again, this whole idea of rhetoric, from what I'm hearing from people who are Jewish who live in these areas, and they're concerned about the kind of rhetoric that Cuomo is choosing to use. For example, when he's saying that he'll shut down synagogues permanently, when on a conference call he was saying, wink and nod, that the Jewish leaders have too much power. It's those kinds of phrases that people are getting concerned about. And now when you see on social media, authorities going and looking in windows of synagogues, taking pictures. You see them on like bullhorns, yelling at people to go inside their home, when, again, to your point, when just a couple streets down, you'll see a massive BLM protest or rally.
Well, it's also, let's not forget that New York is seeing a spike in anti-Semitism over the past couple of years. Like, you can see video after video of usually ultra-Orthodox Jews being attacked in the street. Like, FBI statistics show that anti-Semitism is the worst faith-based hate crime that's occurring in the United States. So anti-Semitism in New York is a real issue. It's often ignored by Andrew Cuomo and Bill De Blasio, who, as you alluded to, really fuel this issue with the kind of language they're using. They might not be coming out and sort of overtly blaming the Jewish community, but you've got to be very careful with your language. The Democrats are constantly criticizing Trump for his language. I just wish they'd be a tenth as careful as they demand from others.
And I had you on a few weeks ago and we're discussing all of the problems with Mayor Bill De Blasio. And now here we are talking about Governor Cuomo. So in the showdown between De Blasio and Cuomo, I know they're not exactly best of friends either, but who do you think's been worse for New York?
I mean, it has to be Governor Cuomo, just because of the death rate. I think Bill de Blasio, as I called him a moron the last time I was on the show, he is a moron. He's an idiot. The problem with Andrew Cuomo is that his mandate and his policies have led to tens of thousands of deaths. I mean, his own department won't release the true numbers. So for all we know, it's at least 6,600, that kind of area, but could easily be double based on some figures I've seen. I mean, to compare someone who is really indirectly caused tens of thousands of deaths to Bill de Blasio, I don't think is really fair. It's certainly not a fun comparison, but Andrew Cuomo is by far the worst, simply because of the death rate in New York. I mean, over 32,000 people have died in New York State, and that's more than any other state by quite a long way. So the fact that Cuomo is being presented as the hero of COVID is just ridiculous. I mean, talk about the media telling you to ignore your own lying eyes. It's just appalling.
Oh, it definitely is appalling. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Ian.
Thank you.